All right, you should be recording there. Nat, if you want to
Perfect.
get going.
We waited for you, Rochelle, just to make sure we're about to start recording anyways, but decided to wait. So welcome to part two of our two-part series for Mental Health Week. Once again, my name is Nathaniel Smith. I'm one of the local health promotion specialists. And of course, with me again is Jackie U. Pritchard, another one of your local health promotion specialists here at CFB Borden. So as I mentioned, this is part two of our two-part series that we're putting on for Mental Health Week 2021, which is a campaign put on by your Canadian Mental Health Association. This week's theme, or this year's theme for the campaign, is understanding our emotions. So that's why we've specifically looked at and are increasing some of our material on that front. So again, this is part two. Part one, what we did is more or less covered mental health, mental fitness in a little bit of detail. We went over the mental health continuum model, talked about how we can use that for ourselves and for others to recognize changes in our behaviors, and that it is important to take action as soon as possible rather than waiting too long. We then talked about the impact of stigma and other areas or aspects on why people wouldn't seek assistance should they be kind of moving down that continuum, and stigma being one of the biggest reasons. So we kind of talked about how stigma impacts all of this and how we can help reduce that impact. We then looked at the specifics around the campaign theme around understanding emotions, and talked about some of the foundations around emotions. And today we're going to get into some of the aspects of how we can use our emotions to help manage our mental fitness, and vice versa as well. So that's where we're heading today. Once again, I will encourage you to use the chat. Feel free to, you've already started there, so that's perfect. Feel free to ask questions and or answer questions as we're going through this today. Again, both Jack and I will monitor the chat maybe when we're not presenting. Again, I kind of find not looking at the chat often enough when chatting over here. Can you move the slide, Jackie? So this is where we're heading today. We're going to talk about stress and performance. And when we talked about mental health, mental fitness last week, it really goes hand in hand with stress. As stress increases, again, there's an impact on our mental health, mental fitness. And we're going to talk about that related to performance and related to health as well. We're then going to talk about strategies to maintain, to improve our mental fitness. I won't get into too many details on that. I want to leave it for there, but that's exactly it. If we are looking at maintaining, improving our mental fitness, how do we go about that? We are then going to, again, make it theme specific for the campaign and look at how we can use our emotions to help maintain, improve our mental fitness, our mental health, and look at some of the campaign materials. We're going to wrap up by talking about the resources available as well, and give you a few links to the campaign as well as those resources. So let's get right to it. So you can see here, stress and performance. A little graph there. It only says performance at times. It says performance and health. So you can place that along that axis as well. Let's start off by talking about defining stress. So you can see I've placed a little equation there at the bottom of the graph. S equals P greater than R. So stress occurs when the pressure is greater than the resource. That's more or less one way you can look at defining stress. But I do find, and looking at this over the last few days and how to relate it to our emotions and all this, you can really kind of take many different approaches at not only that definition, but also this graph. And I think I'm going to try to do that. So more or less, stress occurs for somebody when they find themselves in a situation where those pressures are perhaps a little bit overwhelming and they don't feel they have the resources at that time, the capacities to deal with that stress, with that pressure. And that's exactly what we talked about with regards to the mental health continuum model. As pressures increase, we move down the continuum. Now we're looking at how we stay either in the green or go back towards the green. And we're looking at really those resources. So that's really a different way to look at that equation, how to define stress, how it is implemented in the mental health continuum model. And I'm going to relate it to the stress and performance curve here shortly. But I want to first just talk about the equation a bit more to make sure we're all on the same page. So let's talk a little bit about those letters in that equation. So in the chat there, Rochelle, I'll get you to maybe answer a few of these questions. So is this equation, is it more or less the same for everybody? Is it universal? Oh, perfect. So I always wonder what the answer I'm going to get, because again, it's no, but it is yes in a way. The letters stay the same, but they just change between person to person. Their values will say. So that's exactly it. This changes from person to person. Let's talk about the letters now. So P, pressures. What's included in that? What can you place under that kind of category, that column? Job, family. That's absolutely it. So these are our sources of stress. And I was thinking about this. I'll leave that for right now, but I'll get back to those pressures. Let's talk about the resources now. Money challenges, all kinds of different things can go under there. And I'm going to expand on that shortly. What about resources? What would fall under there? Family again, absolutely. Place them in both categories are depending on, and quite a few different things, depending on how we view that and how we are utilizing them. Supervisors, good. So our resources, those are the things that more or less help us cope with stressors, help us deal with those pressures, etc. Now, my last mental health connections, all kinds of different things, absolutely. Professional assistance, good. So this list can go on, and I'll expand on that. Both lists can actually go on and on. Now, what do we have control over? My last question on this before I put it all together. Meditation's another resource, good. So what do we have control over in the equation? I've joked around about it. I need the Jeopardy theme song in between the time, the lag time from when I ask a question and it gets up onto the chat. Our choices, good. And our choices fall under resources, right? So we really have control in the most part on our resources. With regards to the pressures, we don't necessarily have too much control over our pressures. And if you think about the situation we are in now in the middle of this pandemic, we have absolutely hardly any control over some of those pressures, and they are changing all the time. So being working from home, learning those strategies and mechanisms, trying to do homeschooling. So quite often I find myself working on my computer with my son beside me, trying to do the online schooling. So we are going through all kinds of different pressures. We can't control a lot of that. However, we do have control over our resources. And the more we focus on those resources, find the ones that work for us, the more, again, we can handle those pressures, or at least we can mitigate the negative impacts that those pressures can have on us by utilizing our resources. So let's talk about the performance, the stress and performance curve here. So as you can see, you've got performance, and as I said earlier, you can have health along with it. At the bottom axis, you've got your pressures. So again, the equation fits into there as well. The mental health continuum model fits into this curve as well, and they're all very much kind of intertwined. So as stress increases, our performance and our health increases as well, up until a certain point. And at that point, if our pressures continue to either increase, or we don't focus on our resources and bring us back down that curve, we're going to keep going along that curve, keep going along the mental health continuum model, and eventually see some negative consequences of those pressures, of that stress. So that's when we make it a little bit over that hump into the second side of the curve. At times, you will see this kind of divided up in different ways and some different points in there as well, different colors. But bottom line is we handle a certain amount of stress up until a certain point. If we're utilizing our resources effectively and often enough, it will help us mitigate going too far down this curve and keep us in the more or less the healthy area of the curve, dealing with the pressures that we are dealing with. However, very similar to the mental health continuum model, one large stressor, multiple stressors can push us further down. And the further we get, the more likely we're going to see some of those negative effects of stress, not only on our performance, but again, same thing as I linked before, to our health. And that's when you start to see those changes in our mood, in our behaviors that we discussed with regards to the mental health continuum model. So once again, pressures push us towards the right, towards the increases our stress. Same thing in the mental health continuum model. And our resources help us go back towards the green, back towards the manageable levels of stress. So once again, if we can control and focus on our resources, that's where we're going to help ourselves the most with regards to stress, health, performance. We can't manage or control too many of our pressures, but we can control our resources. So let's expand a little bit on that now with regards to resources. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about how to increase our resources if we're not doing this already. So this is either going to help us maintain our health, our performance, keep us in the green, keep us going towards the green. We're going to talk about how to build resilience, increase our mental fitness, and different things along those lines. The first part is more or less what you are looking at here. And this is nothing new. These are all of the different things that we do for ourselves on a regular basis to help us either stay in the green, get back to the green. When we find ourselves in the yellow, we start doing some of these things and we're back in the green, and we kind of flow through that on a regular basis. So these are our self-care items. You can see here sleep, rest, relaxation, support system, physical activity, healthy eating. So again, all of the different things that we do for ourselves. When our pressures increase, what I also find is these at times are what we put aside in order to complete those to-do lists, to help try to manage those pressures. But again, if we constantly do that or do that a bit too much and we forget about the self-care aspects, again, we start to see ourselves moving in the direction that we don't want to. And again, those situations are going to happen, but the more often that they happen, the more likely that we are going to, as I described it in part one, perhaps feel that yellow is the new norm because we're in the yellow a bit too often because we've forgotten a little bit about these things. So these are the items that, again, we need to perform on a regular basis to keep us going either towards the green or stay in the green. Let's talk a bit about each one. So again, relaxation, rest. At times, even when we're training physically, this is the hardest thing to do. Give ourselves that time to rest and recover from whatever we've been going through. So something to think about and to consider, making sure that we've got appropriate sleep, the appropriate amount and constant amount. Our support system. So you can see even the next point on the for the bullet points there: stay connected, maintain a strong, positive social network. So again, it's been found that individuals with large support networks have a lower level of stress. They are more likely to reach out to that support system and utilize it when they find themselves in need to. Support system has two sides, and you've kind of identified it earlier when I asked you a few of the questions. Professional side and a personal side. So your personal support network are your friends, your family, your coworkers, your neighbors. These are the individuals we probably chit chat with and talk to more regularly. On the other side is our professional support system, our doctors, our social workers, our chaplains, etc. We may chit chat with them often enough as well, but not in the same kind of format or setting. So it kind of just depends on a few different things. However, it's important to have both, and it's important to utilize both. Even if you think of our professional support system, we have regular checkups for a reason, right? To do that touch base in the event that you don't see that professional support system often enough. But again, they're there when we need them. On the other hand, and if you think about our, not necessarily our, but the theme for the campaign this year of understanding our emotions, we're going to get to it here shortly. One of the biggest items they're pushing is for us to be able to better express these emotions that we have. And we are more than likely going to be expressing these emotions with our personal support system, those individuals that we see regularly. And once we start feeling confident and comfortable of doing so, we are more likely going to express our feelings more effectively. So that's what we're going to get to. Good, you're absolutely right. It's important to feel support from both ends, right? So very important to be able to recognize that and feel that way. Physical activity is next on this list, and healthy eating. I'll combine them both. So again, if we focus on these two, they will help us stay fit, both physically and of course mentally, socially as well. Again, eating, we've got courses for this for a reason, and I can talk about healthy eating for quite a bit of time. However, it impacts everything we do. If you think about even me doing this briefing today, if I show up here not have eaten a good healthy breakfast and perhaps a snack prior to, which I did, chances are I would be thinking about getting some food and some calories in, and not necessarily being able to focus on this as effectively as I would have if I would have missed it. So that's exactly it. Healthy eating impacts a lot of the different things that we do, even when we don't really recognize it. And physical activity. So something that, again, we have control over all this, but right now we may have to change how we do a lot of it. But again, we can still get it in to help build and maintain our resiliency, our mental health, and physical activity being one. So again, for myself, I'll just give you a quick little example. Not being able to go to the gym anymore. Well, quickly had to adjust and find different ways to get active and stay fit. But once that was established, again, I can see the benefits again. But again, with change, at times we get off track. But it's important to get back on track for some of these things, because again, if we don't, we can see ourselves moving down that continuum. So this is a little bit on some of the different items that we can do to kind of maintain and build our resilience, our mental fitness, our mental health. Something I haven't touched on too much, and it falls in here, is time for self. Time for self with regards to hobbies, even time to be alone, whatever the case may be. That might link into what Jackie's going to discuss here shortly. But again, when we do find time for ourselves, doing the things that we enjoy, chances are it is helping us manage our stress and feel good about the different things that we enjoy. So again, I haven't touched on it specifically here, but that all fits into here as well. like I said, hobbies, personal time, etc. And again, these are things that we put off quite often when busy, and it is not going to help us in the long run. I think I'll leave it at that for now and tie it in a little bit later on at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Nat. I think you always, in any course, you always iterate kind of over and over again. If we're not able to kind of put that time and ensure we're taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be effective to be able to play all those roles and help the other people that may be dependent on us or are leaning on us for different tasks or responsibilities. So we can't stress enough the importance of that self-care and making sure that you can try and fit some of these in. And I know I personally feel immensely overwhelmed when I kind of fall off the tracks of kind of my plan, right? So it's definitely something to make a priority and really focus in on. The next thing that we wanted to speak about quickly before we get into kind of some of the campaign key points and things like that related to more of those emotions and things like that. And a lot of this is going to be kind of overlapping and all very interconnected, which I mean is kind of the point. But we wanted to share a little bit more about just some mental fitness exercises that, as Nat mentioned, can be something that we kind of deploy as one of those resources when we potentially are feeling that stress or those pressures are starting to become a little bit greater than the available resource. If we're able to deploy some of these resources, it can help us. Maybe it's in the immediacy, kind of navigate the issue that we might be dealing with. Rochelle will be sharing a bunch of resources in terms of, there's going to be a link that we share to that CAF Connection page, and then we can also make available to our Where to Go for Help document. We can even send that to you directly if that's something that you're interested in. I'm not sure if it is posted online anymore. I know we have done a ton of updates to the website, but we can definitely get that and make that available for you. Awesome, good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about some of these mental fitness exercises. So you'll see there's kind of 4 that we've listed here on the slide. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. There's definitely a ton out there, but these are a few that we like to highlight. And the one thing I like to say about mental fitness exercises is you never really know what might work for you unless you give something a try, right? So different relaxation strategies, yoga, for example, might work for someone to be able to spend half an hour, 40 minutes and really kind of relax and recenter. And for others, that might be 30 to 40 minutes of no relaxation, just more stress, and maybe their mind's going a million miles an hour. It's not something that works for them. So again, we like to say, make you aware of kind of what is potentially out there and to give things a try. Try it a few times and see kind of how your body, how your mind reacts to that, and give it a go. Because you never know, it might be something you've never tried before. It might actually be very effective for you. So we always like to say, just don't knock it till you try it. I know in our courses we kind of try a few things that a lot of people might roll their eyes at or not be too into, but that's kind of the point of trying to figure out what might work best for you. So tactical breathing or abdominal breathing is one strategy we'd like to talk a little bit about. Kind of has a couple different names. Deep breathing, abdominal breathing, combat or tactical breathing. Basically, it all is kind of that same concept of really facilitating those deep abdominal breaths. And that's really what's going to cause that counteraction of the stress response. So it's really going to encourage that relaxation response more quickly than our body might do on its own if we're in that stressful situation. So basically, there's a ton of research, a ton of studies out there that basically look at by being able to kind of do that deep breathing into our stomach, slowing our respiration down. That's what triggers that relaxation response and kind of brings us back to that state of kind of level, not overstressed, not super zened out, but really helps us bring our blood pressure back down to normal, our heart rate back down to normal. Basically, that physiological response is regulated. So really, we're looking at trying to encourage a few kind of deep abdominal breaths, really breathing deeply into our stomachs. Maybe it's if people have heard of kind of that square breathing, so kind of inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then repeat, right? Or hold for 4 and then repeat. So it's really trying to slow that breathing down, and take stock of kind of how you're feeling with your breath. Really trying to get rid of all of that stale air. I'm sure everyone who has kids or babies has seen how babies breathe, and they're really their belly is what moves more than their chest. And I think as adults we really breathe really shallowly, and we only really breathe into kind of our chest area, and we're not really taking full advantage of our lung capacity. And there's a bunch of stale air sitting in there. So being able to do some very deep breaths, slow things down. There's a ton of benefits, both physiologically and just even those 30 seconds that you can do on your own. That in itself can be super beneficial, and it's something that's free and you can do anywhere, right? So something to keep in mind. When we talk about mindfulness, this one is one that we've at least shared a lot about in other courses, other presentations and things like that. But really, it's that practice of bringing one's attention to present experiences and kind of looking at things in a moment by moment or second by second basis. It's really trying to pay attention on purpose, and really provides us kind of almost an anecdote to living unconsciously, or just kind of going through the motions, or kind of being on autopilot, right? So you might hear of mindful eating as an example, as really trying to understand the flavors and the textures and all of those things that you might be eating in that moment, rather than just sitting down in front of your computer, probably eating your meal very quickly, and then realizing, oh, my plate or my bowl is empty and I didn't even remember what I ate. So really trying to be attentive and aware of kind of the situations that's going on around you, and what your body is experiencing in that moment. It really helps us kind of focus our attention, and there's studies and things proven that it helps in terms of immune function, mood, stress relief, all kinds of things like that. And it's a huge one to help us effectively handle our emotions under stress. So if we're able to kind of look internally, and I'll speak to this a little bit later when we talk about the campaign materials, but it's something that really allows us to kind of come internally to how we're feeling and dig into that a little bit deeper, for the purpose of kind of getting things out in a more concise manner with our words, or however we might express that, rather than maybe the very quick reaction time or action that we might not want to display. One thing I do like to mention when we talk about mindfulness is its difference from meditation. So basically I like to boil it down to, when we're talking about mindfulness, it's being aware of something, whereas meditation is more focusing on almost being aware of nothing. So it's really trying to focus on clearing your mind, whereas mindfulness is really looking at trying to focus on something and being very attentive and specific to that object, that feeling, that emotion, whatever that might be. So it's always about that situational awareness, not just that kind of blocking everything out and having a few minutes like meditation might be. And there's a ton of different apps and things like that. I believe the link that we shared to the CAF Connection page for this week has the app sheet that we develop, and has a bunch of apps that we like to use, which can actually help with some guided mindfulness exercises and things like that. When we talk about grounding, this is somewhat similar to maybe kind of that's hybrid meditation, maybe a little bit more about mindfulness, but really it's looking at bringing the mind back to the present and minimizing those random, or maybe those runaway thoughts that we often find ourselves in. I personally I like to try and do grounding when I'm trying to fall asleep and my mind's running a million miles an hour, right? It's a kind of a good time to really help focus in on what I'm trying to do in that present moment, and trying to kind of disregard and turn away from all of those runaway thoughts that might be going on. When you're under high stress or high anxiety, there's often probably 106 things on your to-do list, maybe, or maybe you don't even know where to start because there's just so much to do. Grounding exercises really kind of help you take control over your mind, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, to be able to recenter, refocus, and kind of come back down to being able to clearly think and plan out what you might need to do. So one exercise that we like to do is kind of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you're in a very stressful, high stress situation, or there's a lot of things going on, even if you can take a minute and maybe look around you, and 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can feel, and 1 thing you can taste. And that's enough to kind of really help your brain kind of shift gears and focus in on, okay, what are those 5 things? What are those 4 things? What are those 3 things? And it's kind of enough to just let your brain have a bit of a break from all of those crazy things that might be going on around you. So it's really a great opportunity to just take, like I said, a minute, 5 minutes, whatever that might be, of some self-care time to really help you kind of just ground yourself and take a few minutes to maybe trigger a bit of that relaxation response as well to better handle a situation. And the last thing that we have on here is positive self-talk. So thinking about self-talk just in general, it's really kind of, I'm sure we've all experienced this, that kind of inner voice in our head that decides how we really want to perceive a situation, right? So when we talk about that stress response, we're looking at kind of the situations in front of us. We kind of have to go through what we call our mental filter, and then that determines our stress response, if we're going to handle stress well or if we're not going to handle stress well. So what we really have control over in that situation is that mental filter, or our perception of that scenario or whatever might be going on around us. So if we have a kind of that inner voice that's always going to be super, super negative, we're probably not going to be handling that stressor in an effective manner. And we're probably going to be reacting in a way that's not going to be constructive, or might further cause stress or complicate the situation that might be in front of us. If we can kind of look at that shift in our mindset in terms of looking more at that positive self-talk, we're going to be seeing more about kind of those positive messages that are really going to help us look for positive outcomes and be problem solving focused, and look for realistic and positive expectations of what might come, right? So if we're able to kind of look more realistically at kind of things from that positive lens, it's really crazy how much that can change the perceived or the outcomes, I should say, of a situation. When we're talking about negative self-talk, or if we're always kind of in that place where we're maybe always talking down about ourselves, we're probably going to be stirring up or leading to kind of those upsetting emotions, and the ones that again are valid, as we talked about in this campaign. But it's a place where if we can kind of change that mindset and focus more on the positive, we can probably deal with the situation a little bit more effectively. So it really does kind of contribute to that. If you want to look at it as a successful outcome, there's a ton of evidence that shows how that positive self-talk can be very influential in changing those outcomes for sure. Those are just a couple of the mental fitness exercises that we talk about. Let's move now and talk a little bit maybe about the campaign specifically. And there's a few points that we want to just kind of iterate again and go a little bit more in depth about. So if we kind of look back and think of the session on Monday, we kind of started talking a little bit about better understanding our emotions and really the key messages of the campaign this year, which not really already mentioned, about kind of getting to know how you feel and being real about the emotions that we experience on a regular basis, and that being completely okay, right? We don't want to be suppressing those emotions all the time. We know that there's negative outcomes when we do that. So really trying to be effective in how we're communicating our emotions, and that's really kind of one of the key points, is like kind of saying it. And we're going to get into that in a little bit when we share a few key points here. When we talk about kind of this ability to put a name on or say our emotions, what we're really talking about here is kind of that emotional self-regulation, if we want to put like a kind of a scientific tagline on it. So really that ability to kind of process how we're feeling, determining what that emotion might look like, diving into that a little bit better, and how we're going to express that is all kind of related to this emotional self-regulation. So there's no wrong emotion to feel, but if we're able to kind of understand that feeling, that emotion, and better kind of dig into it and determine what our potential outcome is going to look like, that's all going to be better in helping us be more, I guess, self-regulating when it comes to our emotions. So just kind of as a preamble to some of the info that we are going to be sharing here. So we're going to probably go through, I think it's about 4 different articles. Is that right, Nat? I think there are 3 or 4 different articles that we want to just kind of share a couple key points about. But really, as I said earlier, the main point of the campaign was really focusing on trying to put emotions into words and using those to kind of affect our outcome, affect our kind of well-being and our mental wellness. So if we can put emotions into words, scientists and all the people who study this in depth really call it affect labeling. So saying how you feel and then potentially maybe writing about it are both examples of affect labeling. We're actually kind of constructing and making meaning of our emotions when we do this, right? So just looking at a word, maybe it's sad, and then not really leading into it or leaning into it anymore. We might not really be able to figure out maybe why we're sad and those types of things. So what we're going to be chatting a little bit about is kind of some of the key points as to how to put your emotions into words, how to make that process effective to be able to kind of understand yourself a little bit better, and what you could do about it to have more of that mental wellness in your life. A lot of people will say that affect labeling is really kind of comparing it to when you're driving and you slam on the brakes, right? So when you put your feelings into words, you're actually kind of putting the brakes on your emotional response. So you're able to kind of stop, label it, look at the situation, and that's going to probably allow you to better process that emotional response in that short term to better handle that situation. So there's a couple things we're going to talk about, obviously, like naming it, potentially journaling, saying it out loud, diving deeper into things. So let's kind of maybe get into it for the last few minutes here of just kind of some key points that we thought were effective in this whole kind of campaign theme for this year. So we grabbed some of the the titles of some of the great articles that have been shared on CAMH's website. And we do encourage you to kind of go and check those out. We'll kind of give you maybe the Coles notes or the highlights of some of them here today. And just some of the stuff that we thought was kind of really, it kind of touched us and was important that we thought we should share with all of you. Excuse me. So the first article here is called 7 Steps to Calm Your Inner World with Words. So I thought this one was kind of very to the point of the campaign's goals, right? Of really trying to look at turning your feelings, your emotions into words that you can maybe put down on paper and then say out loud and then kind of process as needed. So it really helps, at least from my perspective, break things down into these 7 steps. So I'll just kind of review them here quickly. The first is really checking in with yourself. So how are you feeling in this moment? Can you describe that feeling? And if you haven't already, there is a link that we've shared on social media, and it's on the link on CAP Connection too, of a self-check-in tool to kind of help you facilitate this process. And I think it's really effective in kind of determining where you might be. And it's kind of the first step in this whole kind of 7 list here. This doesn't need to be complicated. Start with the basics, right? Are you feeling good? Think of the emojis on your phone that you might text a friend, right? Kind of what are those top maybe 5 or 6 things? Are you sad, angry, upset, frustrated? What those might be. Don't need to overcomplicate things. The next part is when we kind of really get into being a little bit more precise. So can you find further words to describe those emotions? Can you kind of dig into that a little bit deeper. They call this emotional granularity. So if you want to get scientific here, a little bit more in depth about what you're feeling. Are there other emotions that might be coming up because you're feeling this way? The next part is really taking note of it. So maybe write yourself a note, how you're feeling, write it down. It could be on your phone, it could be in a journal, it could be on a back of a napkin somewhere. Just simply putting things onto paper or wherever, writing it down kind of helps facilitate that getting it out process. So saying how you feel. The next one is kind of taking that feeling that you just wrote down kind of to the next level. So can you write more about that? Can you kind of think about maybe that first step of digging a little bit deeper? Can you put that on paper now? And maybe this would be that further maybe journal entry or writing something back on the back of a notebook, but really taking maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, really delving into that. And this has been shown time and time again by numerous psychologists, psychiatrists, of how important expressing yourself through words can be in helping you kind of facilitate that voicing your opinion and your feelings. The next part, it seems maybe a little bit funny for some, but actually saying it out loud, saying like, I feel upset, right? Like I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling whatever those kind of further descriptors might be. And then the next part is really talking through it. So we already talked about the importance of that social network, leaning on a friend, a family member, a coworker, maybe it is professional help. But once you verbalize your feelings, really don't stop there, trying to dive into it a little bit further. And as you said, Rochelle, it's important to be supported on both sides, because you want someone who's going to be able to understand, maybe not understand exactly what you're going through, but be able to have that conversation with you in an effective, constructive way. And then the last part here is really kind of going full circle. How do you feel now that you've really expressed yourself, you've maybe had that conversation, you have something written on paper? Do a self-check-in again. Are you feeling better? Are you feeling worse? Has this helped calm maybe the potential escalation of those emotions, because you were able to stop and do this process on your own? So it's quite a few steps. I think it's something that we kind of naturally go through anyway, maybe a few that we don't necessarily do, but kind of recognizing, maybe digging a little bit deeper, saying something, kind of talking it out. I feel like that's kind of just that human nature of sharing your emotions. So something to maybe look into a little bit more. Maybe you can add a couple different steps in there to try and help, if expressing your emotions is a bit of a challenge for you. I just found that article to be pretty helpful in terms of making it fairly simple, but really effective in leaning into understanding your emotions a little bit more. I think, Matt, you've got the next couple with some key points.
Yeah, I can jump in, add a bit of information. I found it really interesting there how you said it's like putting on the brakes. And why I find that is it flows perfectly into where I wanted to go. I'm going to first touch on dealing with your feelings, 5 ways to learn emotional regulation. But before I get to some of the points in there, what I find very relevant to this particular article is, in order to be able to utilize some of these different skills and tools, we have to be able to first put on the brakes and recognize where we're at. And I'm going to bring it back to the components of an emotion, if you remember them from part 1, where we talked about the first one is more or less how we feel. So when we recognize if we are frustrated, angry, sad, mad, whatever the case may be, once we are able to be aware of that feeling, the second step is our physiological response. So at this particular time, if we haven't caught it in the first step, now the physiological response is our body telling us that something is going on that is causing a reaction. So this is another cue for us to be able to kind of jump into that, to slam on those brakes and slow the process down. Because if we don't at this point, we are then going to get into the third component, and that is our behavior, our action. And I think you mentioned it in the first session, Jackie, is that at times that happens very quickly, and we don't necessarily recognize the first few steps. We simply know that when situation A happens, I react and behave this way in whatever you want to call it, B. If you're not happy with your reaction, your response, again, a way to do and change that is to slow it down by putting on those brakes, recognizes some of those cues that happened prior to, so that you can control your actions a little bit more effectively. So that, again, that brings us to some of the points in 5 ways to learn emotional regulation. And I think you touched on emotional regulation. More or less means how we deal with our feelings, recognizing and taking action on our feelings. And you mentioned it comes naturally, some of these steps, but also I find it's the opposite. It might not come naturally, and we need to practice and slow it down and implement some of these tools. So I find it, yeah, interesting that way too. So the first few I'll discuss here is, again, all kinds of different ways to call these skills and tools. Situational selection and situational modification was both mentioned in the article. But what I find is we have utilized these different skills and tools and named them differently from probably different sources. So again, they are more or less avoidance and removal strategies. So the first one on situational selection, it is more or less identifying that if we know that we are going to run into a situation where it increases our emotions and perhaps we can avoid it, to do so. And the example it gives is traffic. So if you know that you get riled up and heated when stuck in traffic, that you can take a different way. You can change your timings perhaps when you can control this, so that you can avoid the high traffic times. So different ways on avoiding situations when possible in order to regulate and maintain your emotion. Next one on modification. So situation modification. This is when you are in the middle of a situation and you're already there. So instead of continuing in the same path, not putting on those brakes and continuing on, you probably know where that's going to get you. And in our anger management program, it's up Anger Mountain. And when we get to the top of Anger Mountain, that's when a blow up occurs and we say or do anything at that time without really thinking about the consequences. So if you don't want to get there, situation modification, when you can slam the brakes and slow it down, helps you get out of there with a timeout, for example. This is a different skill, a different tool, but that timeout, and come back to that situation when you can deal with it more effectively and you're not up at the top of Anger Mountain. So I found that article to be fairly interesting in giving you different strategies once you can become more aware of your feelings, your physical reactions, and of course be aware of your physical or your behaviors at the end. So there was a few other points on there too. I'll give you one more. They talk about reframing, and Jackie touched on that, right? So if we can identify a situation, why is this stressful? Why am I mad, angry, sad? And reframe it. Chances are by reframing it, we are going to identify first that we're feeling that way, but then change the way we perceive it to help us manage that uncomfortable emotion. So another good strategy that was identified. The other articles, More Than Simply Fine and Name It to Tame It, are very similar. And I think Jackie mentioned a few key points from there, but these were more or less identifying that if we are not expressing our emotions effectively, to aim to try to do so. And the first one, More Than Simply Fine, is trying to be real about how you feel and not simply say fine, not simply say okay, good, not bad. That's my go-to. They're not bad, but it is to express more than just that and practice it. Because again, chances are we're accustomed to saying just fine and not expressing how we really feel. but to take the time with those in our, probably again, our personal support system, those that we see on a regular basis, in order to try to be more expressive. The name it to tame it, and more than simply fine, again, give us a few different skills and tools on how to do that. If you're not comfortable at first being able to express it in person, journal it. Chances are, by writing these things down, you become more comfortable and confident in how you feel and how to express it. And they also give you a good list of all kinds of different feeling words so that we can increase our feeling vocabulary, as they have identified. And I like the way they state that, because that's exactly it. We can express our feelings in many different ways, and we just need to be able to be more comfortable and confident to do so. And again, how are we going to break down stigma and letting people know that it is okay to have these conversations? Probably by us doing it first, right? So by us doing this allows somebody else to perhaps say, I can talk about my feelings, and be more comfortable and confident to do so. So again, benefits for this regardless of where you're at, even if your emotions are not overwhelming, we can still share anything so that it gives people the confidence to be able to talk about their emotions and break down that stigma. So again, anytime is a good time to be using some of these skills and tools. And of course, if you think about it that way, if we wait until we are further down the continuum to start to implement some of these skills and tools, chances are that will be more of a challenge. So when we are in the green, perhaps it is a better time to practice some of these skills and tools so that we have them when we are further down that continuum. So that's a little bit on the articles that are available through the Canadian Mental Health Association's Mental Health Week campaign that focuses on understanding your emotions. Jackie's just placed a link to our CAF Connection webpage. You will get links there to CAMH, or the Canadian Mental Health Association's Mental Health Week information, resources, etc. You will also get a link to the resources that you see on the screen here. So regardless, for whatever reason, if it is your feelings that are making you feel overwhelmed, if it is the pressures that are making you feel overwhelmed, there are resources on the professional side out there that can support you in any which way. Your Canadian Forces Members Assistance Program is a 1-800 number that will give you support right then and there to you and your family. And they will make you, or put you into contact with the professional resources in your community to help in any which way. So I'll just give you that one. But again, many different resources out there. And I think that's really all that we had to discuss today. We didn't think it would take the full almost hour, but we're getting right there. So again, we put on this 2-part series for Mental Health Week 2021 that focused on understanding our emotions. Again, a lot more great information available online through the Canadian Mental Health Association. Anything you wanted to add, Jackie?
No, I think that's everything. Again, thanks for joining us, and for those watching afterwards, thanks for watching. I know we have another call right at 12, so we have to jump off here for others to get on the Zoom account. But thanks for joining us, everyone. And yeah, we'll I'm sure be in touch if there's anything else. And as always, reach out if you have any questions or concerns. Awesome.
All right. Thanks. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.